Bella, you were in hiding for a long time. What was it that made you decide that you were finally going to come out and tell your story?
Well, it's a scary thing to do, to come out and tell my story, but I help a lot of people. I have obviously a lot of traumatic experiences, and knowledge is the key to getting out, and knowledge is the key to a successful life. And nobody taught me anything growing up. I had to teach myself everything. So my point is to go out and teach, anybody that needs help or has been in situations like mine, and give them the knowledge so that they can go on and have a good life.
How did you feel about knowing that you were actually going to write a book? Was it scary, or did you have people you could reach out to?
Oh, I was very scared. I knew I was going to write a book years ago. I know it sounds strange, but God told me I was going to write a book. And I was like, what do you mean, God, I'm going to write a book? A children's novel, a romance novel? What do you mean I'm going to write a book? And, the years passed, and the time came, and when I first went into hiding, for the first 2 years I stayed in my room. And my whole family, I was just in trauma. I was like this, and my PTSD and flashbacks were going crazy. And I started talking to Tony Napoli, and I would pound on my computer day and night. I was angry, and I was on the computer. And he gave me 100, or more like 1,000% unconditional love. He didn't judge me. He didn't anything, and he just loved me through it. And he kept telling me, save this story, you're going to write a book. And I was still in that anger flashback mode, and I'd be like, what do you mean I'm going to write a book? But when it came to the time, I just felt like, what, he's right. It's time to write a book. And I kind of went like this. My computer was here, and he told me to let him know when I was ready. So I closed my eyes, and I put my finger up, and I wrote it, and I said, 1, 2, 3, send. And that's how it started.
And who exactly is Tony Napoli?
Tony Napoli is the son of Jimmy Napoli, and he's part of the Genovese family. He was the boss of all 5 families. Tony, he's a writer. He's an artist, and he always wanted to write a book. And when the day came that he wrote, we just have that right there in common. We have a lot in common.
Well, did Tony connect you with Dennis Griffin, or how did you find Dennis Griffin?
Okay, what happened is, first I went through a lot of writers. I needed to have the perfect writers for my book, because I have dementia and traumatic brain injury, which is holes in the brain, and severe PTSD, so I knew that I needed help to keep everything in columns and together. So I made some bullet points of the most, the biggest stories, and I talked to a lot of writers, and some really made me angry, and one rejected my story, another one made me angry, and I just never clicked with any of them. And so I was going to go totally to California, to the writers in California. And Tony said no. He said he said he's putting his foot down, and he said, just give me one more chance. And I listened to him, and I cried all night. And in the morning, I said, okay, Tony, let's do this. And by that afternoon, Denny had sent me an email and asked me to call him. And I called him, and we clicked immediately. And by that night, we were writing.
And how did Morgan St. James come into the picture?
Morgan St. James came in. She was my miracle. And Denny told me about this woman, and that she was looking for a girl like me. Somebody that had survived and wasn't a victim, but a victor. And he told me a lot about her, and my heart, I fell in love with her before I ever met her. And in my gut, I knew that she was the one. And so when he connected with her, she told me that she had a lot of things that she was doing, a very busy schedule, writing a couple books, and she saw my bullet points, and she said that she just dropped everything. And we came together as a team that week. I mean, it happened like magic.
Well, that's wonderful. But what was the experience like for you writing the book? What kind of things did you have to tell? Things that you automatically knew, or did it dredge up things that you hadn't even realized you were harboring?
Well, the funny thing about dementia is, and having PTSD with dementia, you remember things. When a flashback happens, it opens your brain, and it just goes, and you have this trauma, this trauma, this trauma, that trauma. Writing the book, I had to open up wounds that I didn't even know were still there. And I had to talk about things that were very uncomfortable. And it landed me on the couch for quite a while. But I can tell you that now I'm stronger than I've ever been because of it.
What gave you the strength to go on when you were experiencing these horrible feelings, kind of looking at the life that was yours that you'd looked at from afar before?
Well, one thing that I've learned is not to focus on me. And to focus on, I've helped people my whole life. It's just like it was installed in me. And so when I focus on, I'm not here for me, I'm here for you. I'm here to help you. It takes all of that away. And not just that, but my team, as we call the Bella team, which would be Tony Napoli and Morgan St. James and Dennis and Griffin and Judy. And then, came along, Allie and, Gino, and, the family just built. And when I knew that I had that support, no matter what, that, okay, I would feel the hurt and I would feel the flashbacks and I would cry and I would punch the air and, I even chopped a few of my mom's flowers off. But, it was the support and the love and just the dedication that I have to these people that I help.
Tell us about who Allie is and what your connection was.
I met Allie when I was, right when I had barely turned 13. And I had gone to Malibu to a home that was, I guess you would say, perpetrating as a place to help people. They actually weren't good. But I met her and I fell in love with her immediately. And I think it was mutual. And she took me under her wing like a daughter. Allie McGraw's profession, she is an actress. She was a model. She's an activist. She's very strong on helping abused animals. She's just a giver. She, like the same kind of heart I have, give, give, give. And I think that that's what I was attracted to. I just have always loved her with all my heart, and I've always just looked up to her. Like, she's my mentor, and like, how you have like life coaches, and that's what she was always to me. Like, she always wanted to make sure every single day what's going on, and how's it going, and where I can find improvement, and always with a positive attitude. Like, and if I'm in a bad mood, it's like, okay, I'm in a bad mood, but let's figure out a way to flip it around. And she is an unofficial godmother, because of course there wasn't a baptism, but she is my godmother.
And how old were you when you met her?
13, just barely turned 13.
And she did a lot of things for you. You told me something earlier of why you didn't respond to some of the things. Why don't you share that?
That woman, she treated me like she was her own daughter. She sent me, okay, Allie worked for Vogue, and she was on the cover of Vogue at one time, and so she's into that field, and she sent me to this woman named Nina Blanchard, and she's like a huge agent, and she wanted me to do she wanted me to do a shoot with her, but she told me I needed to lose 5 pounds, and that made me very angry. I was already a hurt child, and I didn't need any kind of put downs, and I was already skinny, so I went in her face. And then she sent me through American Academy of Dramatic Arts, which is one of the finest acting colleges there is. I went through the program. I completed the first semester. I was even brought back, and it wasn't easy to get into that program. You had to go and show them pieces that you could do, and you had to memorize, etc. My favorite part was the dance part, because I've been a dancer my whole life, and I just loved it. But after everything was over, I was rebellious, and I didn't understand, and I was confused, and I didn't know I had traumatic brain injury, and I just felt out of place. And I didn't understand it.
And if you could say something to Allie right now about that, what would you say?
I would say, Allie, thank you so much for doing everything you've done for me my whole life, for never abandoning me and being there. And I'm sorry and thank you. And those acting classes really paid off.
Well, you went through some really, really traumatic events in your adult life.
Yes.
After you became an adult, what were some of the things you did, like on Sunset Strip?
Oh, I think that the Sunset Strip was one of the funnest times of my life, because I had a lot of control, and I love music. I love putting things together. It's an art to me. I like taking a room and picking which DJ I want and which lightings I want, and knowing which bartenders I want, and make it, it's like a fantasy. You just make it into something and watch it come to reality. And I loved it.
And so you were doing what? You were managing clubs?
Yes, I was. I started out going into one particular club that we'll call the Club. And, okay, there was the Club, then there's Roxbury, then there's 8240, which turned out to be my office, where I worked with the main owner of the Sunset Strip. He's the one that had the most money. And, then eventually it went into Roxbury South, which is in Orange County.
Okay, and was there sort of an underworld current to that, or was it just all fun and games and happiness?
Yes. Okay, actually, that was very exciting. I knew where the guns were hidden in the grounds. There were a lot of fights, because bringing in, a club, you don't just bring in drinks and that's it, and bring in people. You have to hire promoters, which they come in and they take overnight. So there'll be a rap night, and there'll be a rock night, and reggae night, and then even across the street at the Roxbury, you've got 3 different levels going, and you've got live entertainment, and you've got this and you've got that. Well, you don't always make enough money, and once in a while you'll hear, oh, we need $10,000 by Monday, and they start going into what they need to do to bring in the $10,000, and I'm hiding off to the side because I don't want nothing to do with that part. But when it came to the fights and stuff breaking out, and that's when all the main owners would be going and grabbing the guns and all that stuff, I was first in the line. That was action to me. It was fun. Dancing was my favorite part of running it, because I could dance wherever I wanted, and I'm a dancer, but all of it was exciting to me. And I can actually remember telling myself, this is a job that I'm not going to have forever, and it doesn't have a 401k. It's gangster's paradise. And I said, enjoy it to the fullest, Bella. And I did.
Yeah, well, and your father had some organized crime connections, right? And he was kind of a power broker. Yeah. So you'd grown up with some of that.
Yeah, my father was a very interesting man. All the neighbors wanted to know, what mob he belonged to, what this, what that. Growing up, it was always a secret. I grew up as Daddy's little girl, and I saw a lot. But my dad was also a keep it shut kind of person. So he had his own underworld himself, and then he was very successful in life. And yes, he did, as you say, power broker. He was always investing money. As the years went on, I can remember being 12 years old. This was after my mom was gone, and he was remarried to, I don't know what to call her.
The step bitch.
Yeah, the bitch. The step bitch. And she was very evil. And that's when the poker parties became more frequent, and he would have his 11, 12-year-old daughter dress up in his new wife's glittery clothes and go and serve drinks and get chips, and that was just fun. That was normal.
Yeah, so you probably didn't think anything of it when you went into the club life and there were the drugs and the guns and things like that. It was your normal.
It was. I remember businessmen coming in and out of my house. I remember, everything in our house was custom made. It was made to entertain. Our backyard was very huge. We had a big barbecue pit. We had a thing for volleyball. We had custom made horseshoe pits. We had anything that you can think of. And it was always busy. Always busy. My dad was a very popular man.
I noticed you wear his ring.
I do.
Why don't you show his ring?
Yeah.
And what's the significance of that?
Okay, this was my grandfather's, it was my uncle's, and then it was my father's, and my dad never took this ring off. And when I was going through the hardest times at the end, after my ex-husband left, and we were left, when I had to start becoming a boss of a gang and all this stuff that was, not fun. I was very scared when my ex left, because me and my daughters, we all became, what do you call it? We became targets. Because we lived about 10 feet away from a park where all the Crips from Long Beach, Compton, all, the big cities came down, and they would meet every Sunday and sometimes after work, and, they were very attracted to us, and I was very scared. And what I would do before I did anything is I would just look out the window and I would be shaken. And I, would memorize every single one of them. Even in the dark, I would know who they are. And I would rub my father's ring. Like you have those bracelets that say, "What would Jesus do?" I would go, "What would Daddy do? What would Daddy do?" And that gave me my strength at the end. And actually, my mom came over in the middle of this, and I had to get so cold. I had no feelings at all, except for love. I never lost the feeling of love. But my emotions were cut off cold. And my mom had a talk with me in my front yard, and she said, "Bella," she said, "you're acting too much like your father." She says, "I hate it." She says, "I want to cut that." No. Then she said, "I want that ring off your finger." And I just told her, I said, "Ma," I said, "I can't tell you what's going on right now. You need to quit coming over." I said, "I got my ex-husband trying to kill me. There's gang wars going on right now." And she says, "Well, I just don't like you right now. I want it off your finger." And she, was very passionate about it. And I just looked at her cold, and I said, "The only way you're going to get it off is if you cut it off."
And you figured out how to save yourself from the Crips, didn't you?
I had to.
And what did you do?
I joined them. And they, at first, it was a trip. At first it was a trip, but I got to know each and every one of them, and I actually developed a relationship, one-on-one, and I actually became caring towards all of them. And even though there's all this gang stuff going on, I even have a couple that are still in my life today that are really good people. And by the end of those two, I call them the best, worst 2 years of my life because there were some fun times and there were some horrid times. Little by little, I just started getting into it, and before I knew it, I was running with all the main Crips, like the main Crip over in San Pedro, the main Crip over in Compton. I started finding, the big ones. And what was so neat, though, and my mom will tell you this, is that I made it a gang of love. They were still their gang, and they were still doing what they were doing, but I can recall one of the guys, even on Sunday, they would always come over on Sundays, and some of them would go to church beforehand, and I can remember him driving by and honking and putting up his Bible, like, "Are you proud?" And I would just go, "Yay, right on." So there were
Yeah, so you actually became a white female boss in the Crips.
Yes,
That's
I did.
something that nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah, and I didn't even think of it that way. I just knew that I had to take over and protect. It was like natural instinct.
There's a story that you told when one of your ex-husband's people was probably trying to kidnap you, and the Crips came to your rescue. Why don't you tell a little bit about that story?
Wow.
I could just picture what the climax was on that.
They really touched my heart. Okay, I would have informants coming out of nowhere when I didn't know where my ex was, and they would spit my life story at me, and they would tell me they know where my ex is, and this one particular one told me, come on, after he tells me, and I know for a fact he knows who they are, and he's like, I know where he is, because this is during the year that he was missing, and I didn't know if he was dead or alive, and I would go to church, and I would just pray to God, just where is my husband? And God would tell me, what is in darkness will come to light, and the truth will set you free. That's the only thing that he would tell me. Well, this one particular informant was hanging around my house for about a week, and then he wanted to take me to my husband. And so I started to go, and then I realized, what the am I doing? So then I got angry, and I got out of the car, and I yelled at him, and I was like, what the are you trying to do? Are you messing with my life? Out of here. And he looked at me and he started yelling back, and he actually told me, he says, you know what, you're gonna die, which like I haven't heard 1,000 times anyways. And I was just really distraught by it. I was just angry, very angry. And then I saw a look on his face, and I was like, what's wrong? He's just like, and next thing you know, I looked behind me, and I got about 50 Crips behind me, just standing there, Hey, what's going on? You bleep that out. But they would say, Bella, is there a problem here? Is there anything we can help you with? And I just looked back, and I was just in amazement, and the guy left. And I walked in my house, and I just put my head down, and I had tears coming down, and I just said, thank you, but right now I just really need to be alone, but thank you for what you've done.
So they literally saved your life.
Many times. Some of them didn't always save my life. I was raped in that park. One guy had a gun to me. I had a crowbar put to me. So it wasn't all like sugar and roses and Bibles. I had to earn my stripes. And earning my stripes, I broke some bones, and I had to use my discernment, and I had to talk a lot. And it took a lot to get to that point, but when I got to that point, we had barbecues. The guys would come down. The single guys had their kids on Sundays. My house was right there. I'd open up the gates, have a barbecue. We became like a family.
Huh. But then there came the time when there was a helicopter circling over your house. What was that about?
Helicopter. Well, I found some boxes under my house that contained a lot of material. And I mean, we're talking about hits, notes on hits, notes on first rapes, tortures of animals, even an underground secret mission from the government, book that my ex-husband had written. And I don't know if I should say that or not. Bleep. And what did you just say?
Oh, about the helicopters.
So after I found all this information, I already knew that my phones were tapped. And this one day, I had this black helicopter lingering over my house. And it literally just lingered right over. Thump, 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 thump. And I looked over it, and I'm like, this thing is over my house. It's black. This isn't a normal helicopter. And it went on for over a week. And honestly, I have been through a lot in my life. A lot. That scared me more than anything I've ever gone through. Yep.
Yeah, so eventually your house sold, and you felt you had to go into hiding. Is that right?
Sure, I'm correct. Yeah, and so what we did, well, after a year, he did come back. And he came back with some bogus excuse and wanted me to come meet him. I didn't meet him at the time he wanted me to meet him. I laid down on my bed and played worship music, and I prayed my butt off. And I was like, you know what, God, give me the strength, because I don't know what I'm about to walk into.